You sum up the mood there this morning. You're finally allowed outside.
Well, Peter, I think there is a little bit of a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel is probably how you describe the mood in Victoria today. There is a sense that people can see the other side of this, and I think with that, as the weather gets slightly better in Melbourne at this time of year, they're coming with that is a sense of optimism. And this has been a very tough road, but the measures that have been put in place by the Andrews government have clearly worked in terms of getting those numbers down. And from where they were, where we had a couple of days north of 700 new cases to be where we are now is a pretty remarkable achievement. And it's worth thinking about the fact that back in July in Britain, they had cases down to just 350 a day across the country, less than half of what we saw in Victoria on those worst days. Today in Britain, more than 6,000 cases every day. And so it says how quickly this can get out of hand and how carefully you need to put in place restrictions and how carefully you need to ease those restrictions as you go forward. And that's what's happening in Victoria right now.
The hospitality sector is cheesed off, though, that it's not included in this latest round of restrictions that have been eased. Do you believe that should be brought forward, that they should be able to reopen now?
Look, I think the government from day one in terms of putting in place these restrictions and trying to get the numbers down has been listening to the best medical advice and it has worked. You can't deny, no one can deny the fact that it's actually worked in terms of getting those numbers down. So I think all we can do is rely on what the government's advice is in respect of this. And as difficult as that is for hospitality, that seems to be where the advice is at. And I think the way in which Daniel Andrews framed the philosophy about moving forward, steady and safe steps, is exactly the right way to think about this. And we've just got to see the course here. And I think there's the other point. It is about getting the numbers down, but ultimately we've got to see Victoria reintegrated back into the Commonwealth. We've got to get things to a point where Gladys Berejiklian, for example, would have the confidence to reopen the New South Wales border with Victoria. And when you start seeing it through that lens and working out where the numbers need to be in Victoria for that to occur, you end up with the kind of plans that the Andrews government's got in place. And I just think they need to stay the course.
Why not follow New South Wales model, though? I mean, the Prime Minister made this point yesterday, reacting to Daniel Andrews' latest decision. Essentially, the numbers of New South Wales and Victoria are quite similar at the moment, yet New South Wales is open for business. So why not get things going a little bit faster?
I don't actually think they are similar. I mean, the New South Wales haven't had many mystery cases in the last few weeks. They seem to be, and I'm touching wood as I say this, relatively clear of that. There remain mystery cases in Victoria, albeit that they are very small. I think there was one yesterday, so that's great news. Yet that's what we've got to remove. And we do need to get to a point where New South Wales, the other states, feel a sense of confidence in reopening their borders to Victoria. That's actually what I think is the critical step that needs to be taken here in relation to Victoria getting back to normal. And I think the other point that people have to bear in mind, Victoria's gone through a second wave. No other state has. The stakes are a bit high here, actually. I mean, there is no way Victoria, in my view, could risk having a third wave. That's just not the same situation as is applying anywhere else in the country. So I think it is absolutely right that every step is taken very cautiously, soberly, carefully to make sure that we get to the other end of this and we don't have any reoccurrences. And as I say, you can see what happened in Victoria and see how easily it can occur. You can look at Britain and see what's going on there, and it's horrendous. We need to make sure that is not our future.
We had the Transport Minister on this morning, Richard, talking about extra subsidies for flights into regional areas, but the quid pro quo here is that states do have to open up the borders so flights can get to these regional areas to service them. In that sense, should states be moving faster? And it's not just Victoria, WA, Queensland as well.
Yeah, well, from day one, I don't understand how the Commonwealth goes about its business thinking that it has nothing to do with this. The internal borders of our nation must have something to do with the Commonwealth government. I don't reckon John Howard would have been as comfortable relegating himself to the sidelines in the way that Scott Morrison and his government have in respect of this issue. Now, you would think if the National Cabinet meant anything, it meant the head of that cabinet, the Prime Minister, coming in, having some control and then bringing along people with him. And yet, when it comes to the question of our internal borders, state borders, all we've actually seen from this government from day one is heckling from the sidelines and really vacating the space and basically abusing the states. And I don't blame the state governments for taking the positions they have in those circumstances. But what we have got here is a complete lack of leadership on the part of Scott Morrison and his government in relation to internal borders. So you can put, these kind of carrots and sticks on the side that Michael McCormack is talking about, but at the end of the day, what there needed to be was a national plan and strategy in relation to this, developed with the Commonwealth's lead, bringing the states along with it, so that we had some certainty around our internal borders. The opposite's been the case.
Let's go to JobKeeper. It scales back today. Now, Labor had supported JobKeeper 2.0. Do you believe, or do you have any hope that it would be wound back, that would be reversed?
Well, the issue with JobKeeper is it's been a very important measure. It's why we advocated for it initially, and the government was actually not in favour of a wage subsidy when the pandemic first hit. It really took Labor to get them to the plate, but it has been a very important measure. But as you remove it, and we get that it's going to transition out, we need to get back to a normality. That transition and the way in which you taper it has to have some bearing on a realistic assessment of what's going on out there. And the fact of the matter is that in whole parts of the country, in particular sectors like aviation, but then states like Victoria, you've got people who have no prospect of getting work. And so rather than JobKeeper being transitioned out of as people go back to work, what we're seeing today is JobKeeper being scaled back when for a whole lot of people there is no prospect of getting work. If you're in the aviation sector, you're not about to go back to work, get any hours today. For a whole lot of people in Victoria, as the Commonwealth government was saying itself yesterday, there is no prospect of getting employment in their old occupations, and yet that money is going to be removed at a moment when there is a lot of pain in the economy. So today is not a day where we are, welcoming a whole lot more people going back into the workforce, and therefore JobKeeper being scaled back. Actually, all today is a whole lot of additional pain and less money in the economy, and I think that's going to be bad for everyone.
Well, the Prime Minister said in an interview last night that job seeker would remain elevated for some time. Are you encouraged by that?
Well, yes, although let's see what the detail is. I mean, the Prime Minister has made an art form of talking a big game but doing little when it comes to the actual delivery and the walk. So let's see where that ends up. I mean, we've made the point really since the election that the level of New Start was too low. So we certainly hope that when job seeker it goes back to whatever is the new normal, there is a new normal, and it's not what it used to be, because that is not a livable amount. But in terms of how we get back to that place, again, it's got to be done in a way which is against a realistic assessment of where the economy's at and where the job market's at. And that we're concerned that the government don't have that in mind when they're making their decision.